everyone, as crazy as it sounds, we are 1/6 of the way through 2020 Part 2, or as it's properly known, 2021. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 5, yeah, I only saw 5, February new releases from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know what February 2021 new releases did you see, and which ones that I missed do I need to check out. I didn't see as many movies this month as I normally do because it was a bit of a rough month for me. We kicked the month off with my wife having COVID, and so we were still kind of in quarantine, and it was kind of a weird situation the way it played out. As soon as we got back to normal, this snowmageddon thing happened in Texas. Our house went 4 days without electricity and a different 4 days without water, so we had to go to my in-laws for a week. So it just was very difficult for me to actually sit down, watch movies the way that I normally do. So I only managed to see 5 new releases, and I missed some of the more kind of prestigious releases that came out this month. One more thing before we get started. Some people are asking a lot of questions about this new channel. What is it all about? Essentially, I created it because of the way the YouTube algorithm works, that whenever I put out smaller or more niche content on my main channel, it hurts my main content, and I'll actually lose subscribers if I put out kind of something more niche.
That's awful. Just awful.
And therefore, I didn't want that to be a reason why I didn't cover things. So I started a second channel where I could just cover more things, smaller things, more niche things. The content that I want to do, but isn't necessarily hit content, I wanted a place for it. And that's what this is all about. It's just a place to cover more stuff while trying to avoid all the quirks of the YouTube algorithm. And with that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. Now, this one was interesting for me because I watched it with my wife and neither one of us liked it. We didn't like it at all.
Well, that's your opinion.
A couple chuckles here and there for me, like 1 in 10 jokes landed.
And I thought my jokes were bad.
There are a couple things that are just so crazy, weird, and random that definitely put a smile on my face. There's some elements that are kind of like Austin Powers, so it was a nice throwback. But in general, to me, it felt like this unfocused comedy that had been just sitting on a shelf for years and they just decided to adapt it. Or it felt like an adaptation of an SNL skit that never existed. And so for me, it didn't really work. Posted my review, and then in the comment section, a lot of people were saying that they loved it. Some of my movie critic friends posting on Twitter how much they were just laughing out loud the entire time. And then on Rotten Tomatoes at like 75, 80%, I didn't care for it.
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
It was just too weird, too raunchy, but without feeling like it was going for it. It was just kind of the wrong mix of everything. Just throwing so many jokes at the screen with too few of them actually landing. And then the main plot line felt like kind of a very typical plot line about two people and a misunderstanding where there's broken trust, like a plot line we've seen a million times before, and then just insanity thrown on top of it. And so for me, this is one that it just did not land for me. At number 4 is going to be Cherry, unfortunately. This was one of my top 10 or top 15 most anticipated movies of the year. This was the Russo brothers' follow-up to Avengers Endgame. This is Tom Holland trying to show his acting chops, what he can really do. And then there's this kind of this side to it that, in the case of the Russos, coming off of Endgame, they were on top of the world. They did back-to-back gigantic, massive hits. And of course, the franchise helped. There's all sorts of stuff. But they are beloved because they delivered. They could do whatever they wanted. They could pick any project. And they picked Cherry. And that was very interesting to me. A decade of MCU films, great MCU films. And this is what they wanted to do next. And I just don't know why.
Why would they do this?
I don't know what they saw specifically in this project, and I don't know what they were trying to say with the film. On the positive side, Tom Holland demonstrates he is a world-class talent. Like, there's scenes in this where he's just breaking down. You see his descent into depravity, and he's utterly convincing. At the same time, The fact that he is Peter Parker certainly works against the film for the first 45 minutes. As you're watching it, he wears glasses like Peter Parker. He's awkward. His character's right out of high school at the beginning. And so he feels like Peter Parker 2.0, except he's dropping F-bombs and talking about wanting to bang chicks. And so you're like, whoa, this is a bit different and awkward. This is not what I'm used to seeing Peter Parker do. And as you go into the movie, it detaches from that. But just in general, it's a movie that feels more like the Russos trying to show you how talented they are rather than trying to communicate a specific message. There's all of these artistic flourishes and creative ways to communicate things, but all of it seems to serve the Russos and show us how cool they are and talented they are, rather than organically serving the story. So it's more of a distraction rather than aiding what they're trying to say with the story, and I'm not really sure what they were trying to say.
That could have gone better.
The movie touches on the Iraq War, PTSD of soldiers, the opioid epidemic. It takes place during the financial crisis. Like, there's a lot of things you could have something to say about in the context of the story that they're telling. And I don't really know what they were trying to communicate. Therefore, I don't know why they picked this project. It just left me very disappointed that it didn't deliver more. It's not awful. It's just very disappointing. Coming into third place is Tom and Jerry. Now, I mean, how do you decide which one is better between like a movie that you had high hopes for that was disappointing, Tom and Jerry, which you didn't really have particularly high hopes for, and it did not exceed your not particularly high hopes for the project? I don't know. Maybe by the end of the year with more time to process it, Tom and Jerry will drop or it'll go. I don't know. But they're very awkward movies to compare because one is one that I watched with my kids. I didn't think it was a great movie, but I didn't mind it either. I evaluate these films pretty differently because I do have kids that they'll latch on to something and they'll just want to watch it on loop. And so I think through, will it drive me insane if I have to watch this movie on loop? Did I have a little bit of fun with it? Was I just watching the time like, man, I can't wait for this to be over? And that really wasn't the case with Tom and Jerry. It's definitely not a good movie. There's some charming parts. There's some parts that make you laugh with the chaos and the slapstick and everything like that. It certainly feels a lot like a very generic rom-com type plot line. And then they just injected Tom and Jerry into it. But, my kids had fun with it and I didn't hate it. So it's tough to know how do you compare that with Cherry? So between the two of them, it could swap a little bit. There's certainly more talent on display in the movie Cherry. In certain regard, the acting is certainly better from Tom Holland, and there's more that the Russos are trying to do with it. But they try stuff that doesn't quite work. Whereas Tom and Jerry, you know what you're getting in for. It's supposed to be dumb stuff. It's not aiming high. It's aiming for lowbrow kid humor, and it accomplishes that, where Cherry is trying to be, let me show you how awesome we are, and it falls below that. So as awkward it is to have Tom and Jerry above Tom and Jerry above Cherry. I was like, did I say that wrong? No, they rhyme. That's why I'm getting confused. Tom and Jerry above Cherry. At the moment, that's what I'm feeling. If I had to rewatch one of them, Cherry is a 2 hour and 20 minute slog as you just kind of watch these two very unlikable leads make horrible life choices and descend into depravity. Tom and Jerry is a lowbrow family comedy that made me chuckle a little bit. So it's shorter, therefore that's why it's actually a little bit higher on the list. There, that's my reasoning. It's terrible reasoning. Our runner-up for the month is The Map of Tiny Perfect Things. Now, if you don't know what this movie is, I barely knew what this movie was. My wife had to remind me that it came out. So this was an Amazon original starring, I believe her name's Catherine Newton. She played Vince Vaughn in Freaky. So is Vince Vaughn and her, and they were the two that swapped in the movie Freaky. And basically, it's a time loop, quirky, offbeat rom-com of sorts. And therefore, because Palm Springs came out last year and was really good, it feels like very fortunate timing for this film, because this one isn't nearly as good as Palm Springs, but it's still pretty good. It just feels like, wait, didn't we just do this 6 months ago as you're watching this movie? and you have a love story played out with a couple of people in a day that keeps looping. As for the way it plays out, the actual comedy, the way the romance, the twists, the turns, they're totally different. The directorial style is nothing like Palm Springs. With the way movies work, I mean, this would have been in production way before Palm Springs came out. But unfortunately, in a very small window of time, we're getting two movies in a fairly niche subgenre. Time loop movies, like people only like one of those to come out every 5 years. Anyway, I'm making a weird comparison or unnecessary comparison. I thought it was charming enough. It was good enough. It's definitely not the most memorable of movies like this, but you kind of buy into the character arcs of each of these characters, especially as you start to understand what's going on and with their family situations and have the reveals of why each of them is responding differently in this context. You understand where they're coming from. It's real subtle and low key in its humor. It's not meant to be big laugh out loud comedy.
Cool.
To draw once again the comparison to Palm Springs, Andy Samberg, of course, is kind of more of a comedy heavyweight, and that movie goes for some big laughs with some of the stuff that it does. This movie's not really like that. It's more going for chuckles and little grins on your face, and it succeeded at that. And by the time you got to the end of it, I think it hit the right emotional notes. So not a great movie like this, but a good one. And if you're in the mood for something a little bit romantic, a little bit amusing, but, low key, definitely worth checking out. It's on Amazon Prime, and I enjoyed it. But coming in first place for the month, it's going to be Willy's Wonderland. And this is basically Five Nights at Freddy's starring Nicolas Cage. And I say that comparison. I don't even really know what Five Nights at Freddy's is. I'm an old man, and I'm trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about when I really don't.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
But just at its core, it's a B movie, and it just goes for it in those regards. Very early on, these animatronic creatures start killing people, and every 10 or 15 minutes, another one tries to kill another person, and we get Nicolas Cage killing these monsters. And it has just quirky enough. It's just self-aware enough without going too far down that path into self-parody. There's a number of just odd details, especially with Nick Cage's character, who doesn't speak, and he has like all these quirks about his nature, and he's this stopwatch, and every time his stopwatch starts chiming, he does these specific things, and it's just the right types of quirky details. The movie doesn't overstay its welcome. It's only about 90 minutes long, and then it shows up, quickly gets to the killing, the carnage, the chaos, and then it moves on. It doesn't in any way, it didn't transcend what it's trying to be. It's not trying to be anything bigger than a B movie. It could have been a little bit better. They could have been more creative with some of the kills. I suspect some of that's a budgetary thing. There's only so much that they could do with the budget that they had. But if you're into weird, quirky Nicolas Cage horror movies, this is probably the most fun one that I've seen. He's done several in the last few years, and for me, this one was the most fun. But the comparison I did make in my review was that, with the movie Mandy, it's so bonkers that you could pinpoint a few sequences. There's the sequence where he does LSD and then he battles a demon with a chainsaw. You don't really have that with this movie. You don't have some of those specific moments. It's just in general, in this movie, Nick Cage battles animatronic creatures at this family Mr. Gaddy's type place, Chuck E. Cheese type place. It's a simple concept, and I had fun with it. Once again, not a great movie. This wasn't a month that had a bunch of great competition for this one to be number one. The fact that Willy's Wonderland is number one means that of the movies I saw, there was not a ton of competition. Some of you are wondering, wait, why didn't you see some of these other movies? I told the story at the beginning of this. That's my answer. Hey, did you see this movie? No, I did not. It was a weird month. I just missed a lot of stuff. So there you have it. Tell me which movies I missed that I need to check out, certainly by the end of the year. Tell me down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. You can check out my 2021 movie reviews right over there, and I'll see you later.